Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society. His website, resourceworks.com. You can find him on Twitter at SJMuir. Welcome back to the show, Stewart, and Merry Christmas.
Same to you, Jim, and everybody else.
Stewart, we were just thinking about the economic future of British Columbia, and one of the hardest hit places right now is poor little Port McNeill up in northern BC. Their fish farms are being shut down. They're being told they can't log anymore, and yet their mayor says we're not going to shut down our town. The people here are resilient, resourceful, and she's trying to find new ways to keep everybody employed. And I think with the BC government shutting down old growth and fish farming, they're also shutting down one of the biggest two employers of Aboriginal people. Are they not?
Garrett, well, that's right. Mayor Gabby Wickstrom of Port McNeill is one of those plucky mayors who always is out there standing up for her community. I have gotten to know her quite well. She's done amazing work with the broad group of mayors from across BC, known as UBCM, the Union of BC Municipalities. She has a key role there. And if you ever want to know what's going on with things, I find Gabby's a good person, but her energy directed at the needs of her small community is endless. I think it's not atypical to have a community like Port McNeill. We have many, many across the province where they're dependent on a few major rural industries. And these industries are also the ones that drive the whole BC economy, which is a thing that gets lost. You know, if people are in Vancouver, they're in Langley, they're in Greater Vancouver. It's easy to think that the whole economy is going because of real estate, or maybe you think it's because of Hollywood North, or maybe cruise ships. Well, not right now, it isn't. People have different ideas that are usually related to what they do in their own lives. So, if you're a nurse, you probably think that the health economy is a big, big part of the overall economy. If you make coffees, pull espressos at Starbucks, you might think that cafes are what drives the economy. If you look at the stats and you look at what's real and you step back a little bit, you quickly realize that even in downtown Vancouver, the economy is run through rural industries. You take forestry, which they're hammering away at to reduce the size of, that's 18%. It was before the latest round of trying to downsize it, 18% of the BC base economy, which is an enormous proportion. There's actually no other sector. That's 3 times as big as high tech. It's 3 times as big as tourism. If you look at its full impact through the economy. And, what we should be looking at it is a way to sustain it, make it a long-term part of what we do, if what we care about is having good jobs and reliable, renewable industry, which I think is, something people would agree on. Unfortunately, what we get is a lot of flying rhetoric on the evils of, old growth logging or whatever the latest way of phrasing it is. The reality is we have such a vast amount of old growth. The idea that it's running out is one of those myths. I think, politicians are aware that it's a myth, but they're under pressure from very savvy pressure groups that exist for no other reason than to try to make politicians do dumb stuff that represent the interests of whoever it is that's behind those groups. I mean, that's just what they do. And forestry has been hit by it. We've seen other industries hit by it. When in fact, if we take a professional science-based approach to aquaculture, to forestry, which are the two industries that really make Port McNeill a great place to live because they create great jobs, good paying jobs, year-round jobs that include many First Nations in both of those industries, they should be the ones that, every politician in the province uses every opportunity to go out and celebrate and find ways to increase and grow. But unfortunately, we do have this circumstance in the times we live in where there seems to be, the biggest prize is to those who can shrink the economy the quickest, most effectively, most permanently. And that's really unfortunate because other parts of the world where they have figured out how to talk about things and how to solve problems. I mean, I'm not saying that there aren't issues with things that we do on the land or in the water or what have you. Of course there are issues. That's why we have regulations and laws. We need to enforce them. Maybe we need to improve them. But this relentless drive to, eliminate entire parts of the economy, it's just not a good path to be on. Especially if you think that a priority for a society, for example, should be that there are good jobs for groups that have been excluded from full economic participation. I mean, in recent times, women have been the big example of that, but also people of color and most definitely the Indigenous peoples of Canada. They've been excluded. So just when these groups are in the slot for some of the biggest opportunities in the economy, you have these campaigns that are trying to eliminate those opportunities that create the best paying jobs and create the greatest amount of wealth for Canadians to remove them. It's one of those quirks, I guess. So let's hope that good sense prevails and we do see a pathway for aquaculture that is reality based and not fantasy based. I mean, you do have these people, Jim, who are saying, oh, we'll just grow the salmon out of the water, take them out of the water. Why would you grow salmon in the ocean? What a stupid idea. You should put them in a big swimming pool on land. That's what salmon really like. Well, actually, that doesn't work very well for all the obvious reasons that you would think of. And if you want to grow salmon and healthy ones, sustainably grown, do it in the ocean, right? It makes sense. And also, when it comes to forestry, trees are kind of like people. They are young, they grow up, they mature, and at some point they do die. They don't all just sort of live infinitely for thousands of years and we have to revere them. They actually rot and fall down. And if we can manage things so that a certain number of those trees, we intercept the natural processes of decay and death, and we harvest those trees when they're at their most valuable, and we replant them. We plant 3 new trees for every one that's taken out. Maybe that's a good way to manage things, and that's actually what we are doing now.
Stuart, you're pointing out if you stop BC from being a primary source of lumber for construction, what happens? The demand for lumber will continue. Where will that lumber come from, and what kind of a stress will it put on the planet?
Well, if it's the high value, the rare lumber that's got the tight grain that's suitable for certain applications, it's rot resistant, it's got these qualities that a lot of the mature timber, it's, not necessarily old growth, but mature species, certain, red cedar, yellow cedar, certain species that are just very specific to BC and something we have a long history of doing well. There's not just some other place that same wood will be sourced. And it will be sourced because they'll need, if they want to build a water tower on top of a building in New York City, you've all seen those panorama shots of New York. I don't know why they alone do it this way, but there's probably other places too. But those round barrels on top of all the buildings in New York, pretty much, are made of Western red cedar because it has special qualities for holding drinking water that humans use. They'll get that from somewhere else, I guess, but they'll also migrate to other species, and those species will come from Indonesia, they'll come from Brazil. Tropical hardwoods will replace what we have here for certain applications. When it comes to commodity, like a 2x4 to build your house with, well, that's fine. You can get that from Finland if you want, or Alberta. Canfor, which is a historic BC company, they're investing in Alberta because they know they can get things done there. T.L. Jones, the biggest privately held forest company in BC, they are I think now up to 4 United States. Because again, there's places.
Stuart, you just faded out there. Can you repeat what T.L. Jones is up to?
Yeah, T.L. Jones is one of those companies from BC that is diversifying. I think they're probably realizing that BC is not set itself up to be a reliable place for forest investment, even though it has so many success conditions. They're saying, well, we better diversify and reduce our risks to this one locale where, they don't seem to mind frightening investors. I know there might be people listening who say, well, yeah, investors are bad. They're greedy. They take all the profit. Yeah, well, they do invest to get a profit. And if they don't find that profit in BC, they'll go find the profit somewhere else. That's how business works. I suspect all of your listeners actually know that. It's probably why they're listening to us. But, there's a lot of people who aren't listening to the show who do go about their daily lives, thinking that anyone who is motivated in their business activities by the profit motive is somehow acting not just selfishly, which is rational, but also they're acting in a way that's bad for everyone else. And so that's kind of a mentality of a lot of people in government now, this sort of root hostility to the basic principles of business. So I think for those in business, there's a lot of work to be done in communicating and making it clear that when you have a business-based economic system, you should try to have a healthy relationship with that.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, again, the BC government, the current government under the NDP doesn't really imagine things on business terms. I remember when Carol James was the finance minister, she said she had nightmares about the price of natural gas going up and down 1 cent a cubic meter because it meant so much to the provincial treasury. Are we ignoring something that could be making BC almost one of the most independently wealthy places on earth by not encouraging LNG?
Yes, we are if we don't do that. I would definitely give the BC government some kudos for the encouragement they are giving to get the LNG Canada project going, to support the wood fiber LNG project, which is going ahead, smaller one than up in Kitimat. But at the same time, it's been slow to emerge. We've got all these complications where it would be helpful if governments really got out the brass band to say, we do want this immediate. And right now we actually have a really good case study emerging out of Europe. I mean, things are so bad there, high energy prices. They've increased 4 to 5 times over the usual. They're at record highs. You look at some of these charts illustrating the spike in prices, it's astonishing. And as we speak, they continue to go higher and higher and higher. And actually, this afternoon of this day that we're speaking on, just before Christmas, we have the industry getting together in Europe and saying unbearably high energy prices demand action from leadership. And they're pointing to a number of things. They're saying there's financial speculation from the hedge funds. There's imbalances in the gas market, which is, I think, a reference to Vladimir Putin and what Russia's trying to do with stopping the flow of gas from Russia to Europe, which is a problem in winter or any time. Decreased energy from renewables, which means, the wind's not blowing, so those wind turbines aren't producing electricity. They've been shutting down nuclear energy in Germany, and that's a problem. They've closed down coal mines ahead of time. I mean, they should wait to do that until such time as all of the rest of the energy system is able to prevent situations like we have right now. So these are some of the things that are causing industry to say, look, we just have to close down. We cannot afford to manufacture all kinds of things. Fertilizer is one of the big things, but also the metallurgical industries are coming forward, the lime industry, the clay association. I don't even know why the clay association is complaining, but the recycling people are saying, I mean, this is just happening. They're saying we're just going to have to lay people off and close because we cannot afford to source and pay for energy at the current prices and be in business. So once that happens, I mean, farmers need electricity. You need to have cement and steel and be able to do things with recycled products. And right now, because of the price of gas, but it's not necessarily all bad. If you're the United States, which is able to get relatively cheap gas, natural gas, turn it into LNG and ship it to Europe, you can make a lot of money off that, which is really the whole idea of the LNG business. And I remember, now it's about a decade ago since the buzz started in BC around 2011 on LNG, liquefied natural gas. If we can escape the boundaries of the continental North American gas system, we can escape the low prices that prevail, because there's a lot of gas in North America. And there's parts of the world where there's not a lot of gas, but they need gas. So what if you were to liquefy it, get it on a ship? I think by this time, I think most people know, the mechanics of this. But what's new and different, and what's worth talking about right now, I think is the incredible effect that this situation in Europe has had on LNG prices. So I was just looking, the cost of natural gas is now, if it was equivalent to the price of a barrel of oil, it would be over $300 a barrel. Right now, what is it? I haven't checked lately. It's around $70. But it's actually trading as gas at that higher level. And that's created a huge opportunity. There was a ship that went out of the Gulf Coast of the United States, an LNG ship. It was headed through the Suez Canal. It was going down, but probably headed for India or Southeast Asia. And it just got turned around a few days ago, last week on the 15th of December, because someone said, wait a minute, we're going to sell this thing into Europe. Now, one shipload of LNG, you think, oh, it's a shipload. That can't be very much. Well, right now, I've calculated, I did the numbers, I based this on a whole plethora of factors, and I've done this calculation before. I'm pretty confident in my math on this. I'm not really a sectoral expert. I'm not a financial analyst, so I'm not claiming any credentials I don't have here, Jim, but I am confident enough in my numbers and the sources and my calculations that I could say that right now, if we had finished the Pacific Northwest LNG project, which was supposed to be done in 2019 and shipping, we would have cargoes leaving the north coast of British Columbia at a value of over $200 million a day right now. Can you believe it?
And of course, it would be nice if we could find a way to get BC and Alberta's natural gas to Europe as well, where again, as you mentioned, they're paying extraordinarily high prices for natural gas, and Russia's doing what Russia does best. Apparently they're throttling back their natural gas shipments to Europe once again because the Europeans are complaining about 100,000 Russian troops gathered on the border of Ukraine.
Yeah. It's hardball. The Europeans know that. They realize that they coexist with this neighbor who is usually up to something. We tend to forget that. I mean, Canada is so lucky to be under the protection of the NATO umbrella, but especially a neighbor of the United States, where the affinities we have as nations have allowed us to kind of drift aimlessly through, carefree, fancy-free, and not worry about any of that stuff. Whereas in Europe, if you're especially one of those countries that's close to the border with Russia, if you're Finland, if you're Estonia, if you're Ukraine, well, he can get at you in very direct, immediate ways. And if Europeans don't stand together with the support of North America through NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the whole way of life we have could collapse. I mean, I'm not sitting around thinking about this. I'm not a doom and gloomer on that, but I mean, it's just a geopolitical reality, Jim. Even as we speak, on a daily basis, the Russians fly along our northern border. They fly the Alaskan border. They fly our territorial boundaries in the Arctic just to see if we're paying attention. And what if we just, wing it over there a little bit into their territory and see what happens? That's what they're constantly doing. And if we're not out there to put our aircraft up and say, excuse me, we're here, we could see them muscle in. And that's just a daily constant of having our military presence. Unfortunately, we have this wonderful collaborative relationship with the U.S., and we do have to do our part. But if it wasn't for the U.S., I don't know, what would do, because we'd be vulnerable. Russia actually is a neighbor. Look at the globe. Look at the top down. look down on that. Well, Russia is right there as a border. Yeah, there's some distance between us, but so we're in this, and there should be a way for Canada to contribute to the energy security of Europe. We've been trying to do that. There was a project that led me to travel to London before the pandemic, and I spoke at the Canadian High Commission called Canada House, Trafalgar Square, at a meeting we had. We asked people who were interested in natural gas from Canada in LNG to come out. We had probably a couple of hundred people come out to one of the meeting rooms there. We spoke to them. There were deputy ministers from provinces, Alberta, from the East Coast. There was a federal senior bureaucrat there, and I hosted a panel actually with the mandarins from Canada to explain to the energy traders and LNG specialists who were in the room there. I mean, these were smart, savvy people engaged in the business of energy trade and development, and they're looking for gas from Canada. They want to diversify. They know what Putin's up to. They know that the complexity of the energy system means if they get off coal, they need to have a cleaner alternative, and that, in part, is natural gas. They can't just flip to the wind. We're reminded again this year that the limitations of wind are always going to be there. You know, even with batteries, it will take a very long time for all the batteries needed to provide backup in the way that natural gas is a peak shaving solution, which is to say that you can store natural gas, you can buy it when it's cheap, and then you can use it when it's expensive as long as you have storage for those times, you know, when you need it. And you know, there's certainly a case, we see it in the United States, where large-scale batteries are allowing wind farms and solar farms to back themselves up so they can overcome this problem that the sun doesn't shine at night and the wind doesn't always blow. But as I say, that's taking a very long time. It's very expensive to scale, and Europe is not even close to getting there. So they're going to need natural gas as that measure to get them through to that longer-term picture when maybe there's not so much gas. But they need it right now. There was a project, Saguenay LNG. It was proposed back in a few years ago. It was going to result in gas being supplied under long-term contracts to utilities. I think some German ones, at least one German one, had signed on. I think one in Poland was interested. And the project advanced through the Quebec approval process, and finally at the end, the Premier of Quebec, this is pretty recently this year, said, you know what, no, we don't like this project. We're not going to allow it to happen in Quebec. And as a result, Putin is now able to intimidate the Europeans in ways that he would have been able to do maybe a little bit less had that project been under construction now. Of course, it would take maybe 5 years to get the thing built and running where it could actually make a difference. But, you know, Canada can make a difference in this. And what's happened, well, you know, we've seen projects opposed, LNG projects like the Pacific Northwest one, that got shut down, and eventually the proponents just walked away, largely because of manufactured protest. It wasn't, you know, the First Nations wanted it, the local residents wanted it, the people who supply the gas in those parts of Canada wanted it. The small but vocal groups that didn't want it are the ones who caused it to be shot down. And that's a shame because all that has just gone to the United States. You know, now they're shipping this year, I figure, by my calculations, they have a $700 billion a year industry at current prices in Europe, which are inflated and will come back down. But it's almost $1 trillion industry. Canadian it is. It's over that right now. And we're not in that because we let those opportunities slip away to the States. That's the net result of all that. So, you know, I would say, don't take the opposition to things lightly. You know, we have to address it head on. If there are real lapses that need to be fixed and improved, let's fix them. If there's artificial trade war type of opposition to projects where people are trying to thwart investment in Canada because they want it to go somewhere else, or there's people who just have an ideological view of capitalism and they oppose things like we see in Northwest BC right now, or people say we shouldn't have gas because it creates climate change. You know, yet they want China to have more coal and Germany to burn more coal. You know, it's illogical. It doesn't make any sense. When we have these situations, we should speak up and be firm and confident that we are right. We're on the right side of history when we get lower carbon, lower emission alternative fuels to the world, because the world is crying out for them. There's no alternative.
Now, one of the things that you've been super keen on is Aboriginal partnerships And also, all these protests in the name of the Wet'suwet'en people against pipelines across Canada, shutting down traffic, disrupting rail lines, and so on. What do the people who live there and work on this project actually think of it?
I've made many trips to the Northwest. I've spent time to visit, and I've asked to be invited to First Nations. I don't want to just show up and say, here I am. I think that's rude. I always ask, would you allow me to visit? And when someone says yes, and usually people do if you ask, because they do want to share their story. What I found out is that the number one issue for leadership in First Nations, and it doesn't matter if they're hereditary or elected. I mean, that's a kind of false, division. People who are in leadership positions care about the welfare of the people that they report to. And that starts with the most basic things. Do I have a safe and healthy home? Or do I have a house that's falling down and there's 10 people living in it and there's children there who are breathing air with mold in it and it's not heated well? What can I do about that as a leader? Do I have a way for the seniors to get to the senior center to share the language with the next generation? And if they pass away without sharing that language, the culture will be threatened. I mean, those are priorities. Healthcare that's a priority. Things like that are what, leaders care about. And I hear that over and over again. I mean, I'm not speculating. That might be the case. That's what I hear when I travel through that whole Wet'suwet'en territory. And yet, we have these anarchists show up from Toronto who have got some, U.S. environmental organization that's giving them some money, or they have some fake GoFundMe on to basically launder the money from those organizations. They show up and they have an agenda. It has nothing to do with the concerns of local people. And it's very divisive when you have people who brandish the name of one particular First Nation that has all sorts of challenges as if, they are speaking for it. Well, who the heck are they? If they're not from that nation, and very few of them are. I mean, there's a couple that sort of apparently validated, but for the most part. And, recently, if you think I am making that up, I mean, recently one of the First Nations, the largest community of the Wet'suwet'en, had their election for their what was once called the Band Council, the First Nation, elected, board. And there's only like 700 voters out of a small population of a couple of thousand members of that First Nation. How many candidates do you think they had run for their council seats? I'm just going to put you on the spot, Jim, and make you guess. How many candidates put their names on the ballot?
32.
No, 85.
Oh, well.
Yeah, that's like, 11% of the First Nation residents, members wanted to be a leader. Wow. And what about, some of those hereditary chiefs who are out there in the media, you're seeing they're opposing this and that. They must have put their names on the ballot too. Well, one of them did and got elected, but the other ones didn't. I mean, I don't know why. Was it because maybe they knew they wouldn't get elected? The one council member was a gentleman who's a school teacher, quiet, no public profile, just someone who cares about the welfare of people and teaches children. He was the most popular councillor. It wasn't someone ranting against, the things that these anarchist groups planted on the pipeline route for the natural gas pipeline are ranting about. It's just people caring about the same things that anyone else cares about the, quality of life for their family and their community. So my heart goes out to these groups who have seen their democratic processes and their ancestral hereditary processes turned into a kind of tool for political activism by interest groups that have really no interest, no commitments. I mean, when they stop a project, do they stick around and, create some jobs, build some houses for people? No, they move on to the next thing. I mean, one of the anarchists who's making a film that our tax dollars, the CBC, they're actually paying these people for their documentary film. One of them is he portrays himself as being about Indigenous rights and so on. Well, the last thing he did, he even wrote a book about it, was he got embedded in a protest in the Northeast United States that, again, just like right now, is against a natural gas pipeline. But it was made to look like an Indigenous rights protest. And that pipeline eventually got shut down, or not built. And so you've got these pros. They go around from one of these to the next. They're kind of the traveling troubadours of anti-capitalism who looked for First Nations people who they can latch onto. And, in saying that, I must add, Jim, that there are real rights gaps. There's real grievances. There's legal questions that are not settled for a lot of Indigenous people in Canada. And it's an obligation I hope our generation deals with. I mean, they're so difficult to solve some of these. It will take more than one generation, but we have to do what we can now. And that's why I'm, my personal commitments, I've seen the opportunity to create a stage, and we're doing an event for the third year in May in Vancouver at the Fairmont Pacific Rim. It's called the Indigenous Partnerships Success Showcase. We're bringing together people who work together to create partnerships to bring everyone along, with business and First Nations working together. And that's how you do it. And so there's, I think, a strong sense of what you can do when you have partners that are authentic and genuine. And, this has been a popular event. It's been growing. The demand for it is just off the scale. We're working really hard as a team to deliver this event. Anyone who wants to know more, just follow me on Twitter. I'll be talking about it, SJ Muir, or indigenousuccess.ca is the website. But whether it's a live event or a hybrid, we'll deal with COVID. But we're definitely going to have the event this year. And this is how we solve these big problems.
Stewart, thank you so much for chatting with us. All the best of the season for you and your family.
Why, thank you, Jim. Same to you.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society. His website, resourceworks.com. You can find his latest releases on Twitter at SJ Muir. If you have any questions for our guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at House Street. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of House Street Media Incorporated.